we are here for the sewing video that I've been talking about. And we're in like a weird setup here. I've been trying different ways with my filming arm and my filming setup. Usually my sewing machine is like back on this. Can you see where my hand is? It's back on that table, back over there. So now I've got my GoPro on like a weird, like a wider shot. So it's really only about like literally 7 inches from my, this is only 7 inches, but we're really close and we've got this super wide shot. So that's the good thing about a GoPro. So hopefully, and because of that, all my filming lights are like coming down here. So it's kind of shadowy under here, and I've tried a whole bunch of things and this is like the best I could get it. So hopefully this works. I know it's shadowy right here, but without like, you know, setting up even more lights, it's going to be a little difficult. So I'll do my best to talk us through everything and, you know, try to show you the best I can. But I think this is the best I could do with an angle so that I could get like the clearest vision for you of what I'm doing. All right. So I think what I'm going to do is cut this into 2 parts. The first part will be, I made us like a little signature, you know, like it's just copy stained paper. And we'll talk about sewing on, you know, the sides of signatures and sewing tabs on, different ways I do that. Like embellishing the edges with sewing and stitching and kind of some of my tips and tricks for that. And I'll show you some of the things that I do frequently. And then we will move to the next video, which will be, I've got kind of this pile here of like tags and cards, journal cards and things like that. And we'll talk about sewing on those in the next video. Okay. I've got my machine loaded up with black thread. I just use a pretty standard Brother. This is just a Brother machine. Has the drop-in bobbin right here. And in the back, I have got one of the, you know, huge like serger cones of black thread back here. So, and it just feeds up. And at the top of my machine, I've got it going where the where the thread would normally be. Anyway, so I'm loaded up with black thread because I think that'll show you the stitches the best way possible. You'll be able to see them as best as possible. We'll work on light paper, so hopefully that'll help you see what I'm doing. And yeah, let's just get started. I'm gonna show you as much as I can think of, and then you guys can leave me questions and you know, other things in the comments. I apologize in advance if I bang this thing because like it is really close, so I'm gonna try and stay underneath it, but we'll see. Okay, so we're just gonna remove page 1 of our signature because, like I've discussed in other videos, when I am decorating a book, sewing on the edges, that sort of stuff, I always start with my signature unbound because then I can take single pages out like this and I can work on just this page, sew on just this page, and that makes it way easier than trying to ever like do any sort of sewing once a book is already bound. That's really difficult. So I like to work on my signatures like this before they're bound. So let us, I have to resist the urge to like pull this back towards me because sometimes when I'm sewing, I adjust the way the machine goes. So I am, hold on. See, I'm all funky here. Just let me get out, not be out of sorts. I've got my, my monitor over here so that I can see what I'm doing, so I can see the shot and make sure that I'm staying in frame and everything. But I just had to move that a little bit because I'm sewing at a weird angle. Enough of that. Enough telling you that because you already know that. So the first thing I'm going to say is when we're sewing on this is just copy stained paper or notebook paper or regular, like, you know, thinner papers like this that are not cardstock or not heavier scrapbook paper, but just like this plain old paper, you need to be aware of some things. I like to stick On the edges, I like to stick to just a few different types of stitches. My machine has got a bunch of stitches, not as many as some do, and more than others. So like, for example, it has the little stitch that does the vine and leaves. That one tends to do okay on here, but there are also some fancier like quilting stitches and stuff that just by the time you go through paper, they swirl around too much and they get too close, and then they won't sew. Like you won't see the design, and they'll tend to want to rip out the center because it's poking too many holes too close together. So you have to be careful with like how fancy you try to get on just one single layer of thin paper. So to give you an example, let's just try, okay, so here is plain stitching. Plain stitching works just fine. Here's a zigzag. Zigzag stitching working just fine. But now I'm going to switch it, and I'll pull this out and you'll get to see it. Now I'm going to switch it to, let's see, here's a really funky design that I think I've probably only sewed once. Okay, so we're going to just let this go for a second here. And do its thing. Okay, and then we'll try one more of the really funky ones. Let's see. This one is a, oh no, I know I've tried this one before and it's, okay. All right, we're gonna let this go for a second to the end of the page here, and then I will show you. Now, hopefully you can hear me okay. All right. So let's pull these off and let's look at what we did. So the straight stitch looks fine. The zigzag looks fine. But then we get to these stitches here, right? And like that right there, that's supposed to be a little flower. But because it's going through paper and the paper will give, it's just not going to be defined. So it's going to just look like it gets to there and it just kind of all, the paper starts ripping. Or like this one, this is supposed to be a more designed, like a more defined geometrical part in here. But because the paper starts to give and rip, because it's thin enough, then it just, you just kind of get this weird little thing. So I would say always check your stitches that you're going to use before you use them on just a single page. Now, if you do have a machine that has fancy stitches and you want to try some of these other ones, I'd say the best idea is to, let's see, I know I brought some. So one of the ways that you can get around that is to, and it also provides another type of accent, is to do it over a piece of fabric. So now I've just laid my fabric down over the edge. And now let's say we want to do this flowery one over the edge of this. So let's try and see what it looks like over the fabric. And already I can see that we actually have petals now, whereas on the other one we didn't. All right, and then maybe I'll switch back to that other stitch here too. Let's see. Excuse me. Okay, I'm going to do this geometric thing again here, and we'll just see. So now what we're doing is, by putting that fabric on there, we're providing some stabilization and like stability behind it, and the paper, you know, doesn't have to be the only thing to hold it together. So now let's look at the difference. So here's where we were before, this like chunky flower thing that just wants to, what? And here's what they should actually look like. So here we have much better defined stitches. We actually have some petals and some flowers going on. And then same thing here. This just looks kind of crunchy, and in person it's even worse because there's a lot of like just kind of, let's see, it's hard to show you. I'm trying to figure out where the camera is. There we go. So, but then look at it over here. and it's way more defined, and we actually have what the pattern should look like. Then on the back side is a big difference too. On the back side, these are where we didn't have the fabric, and here is where we did have the fabric. Okay, so even there it's more defined, because you know, you are gonna, unless you plan to paste something on here, glue something on here, you will have the stitches showing through, which is fine. I like to do that, but it definitely helps if you add some stabilization on there. So adding some fabric definitely will help. And then that's a way that you can then go ahead and use your fancy stitches on just regular paper. Plus it adds kind of a nice little touch along the side. Do it over some ribbon, you know, rip off some little slices of muslin and stuff. It just adds, you know, leave it stringy if you want. If you want it very neat, you could cut it very straight. It's kind of up to you. So that's kind of my word on using the fancy stitches. Most of the time, I'm going to go over to this page now. Most of the time, I tend to stick with straight stitches or zigzags, which I'm going to put it back down to where I am so that I don't forget this. And on my machine, I can make the zigzags wider or more narrow and smaller. I think, you know, some machines you just get, you know, some of the basic machines you get very basic options, but mine I can make bigger or smaller. So we're going to start with a real basic way that I like to use sewing to add some interest to the edge of paper in a book. And I'm talking just plain sewing stitching. One of the things that I've done in the past in books is maybe, let's say that I was making, well, okay, so we just finished my heart journal. And it had a lot of pinks and kind of teals in it. So I'd load my machine with pink thread and then pick out maybe, you know, 2 or 3 pages out of every signature, and I would do this to them. And then that provides kind of some continuity. Plus it means that you don't have to, you know, do major decoration to this page. All you have to do is do this little sewing trick, and then you end up with, you know, a really nice look. So I would load it with pink and do down the page a couple times with pink, and then put teal in and go over it again. And it looks like you spent tons of time and it looks really fancy. It's big payoff because it's really not that hard. So I'll show you what I do. I just start at the top. I don't bother about back stitching or anything to secure the stitch. Okay. I just start going, and now I'm on a flat plain stitch. I am going to make it longer. So my machine defaults to 2.5. I'm going to go up to 4 just so that we move a little faster and don't need to make as many stitches. Plus, longer stitches I think look cooler, and they put less holes in, so you're going to not end up with as many little tiny holes, which puts more stress on your paper. Okay, so what I'm going to do is sew back and forth, and I just kind of move my page around as I go, wavy like. Okay, then you can do one of two things. You can pull it up and snip it off, and then we get this wavy line, and then put a second one, and I'm going to just kind of crisscross it, but I'm not going to crisscross it on any sort of regular intervals. I'm just literally pulling it through. This is kind of like collage again, guys. You have to let it go. So there we go. We've got a couple, and then I would usually come back with a third color or another color, not a third, but a different color. And you can do it wavy down again, just on a plain regular stitch. And this adds just a super cool look to the edge of the page. It's textural, right? So it feels cool as you're flipping the page, and it looks good on the back side too. Plain stitching on a machine usually will look good on the front and the back. So this looks cool. You can leave the threads if you want to. You can cut them off. That's personal style. Now in the middle of this page, let's see. Let's pretend see where my fold is here. I'm just going to pretend like this is the other side of the page. Well, here, we can just do this. Okay, there we go. Now we have a new fresh edge. So pretend like this is the edge of my page. I'll show you what I do. Sometimes I'll throw some zigzag in there. So I'm going to do a couple lines of regular weavy back and forth. I'll get to the bottom here, and instead of pulling my paper out and cutting, I'm just going to lift my thing up and spin it around and go back. Okay, and then I'm going to spin it around again. And now I'm going to put it on a zigzag stitch, and I'm gonna make mine elongated just because of the sake of time. And I like a longer zigzag sometimes. Play with the length and the width of your stitches if you have that capability. It makes things look really cool. And you can make some really cool looking stuff just by changing the width of, if you can change the width and the length of your zigzag, you can make all kinds of stuff. So there we go. That took me all of a few seconds, and it wouldn't have taken me that long if I wasn't talking during it. And look at the cool edge that I have on my page now. So that is a real basic way to add a bunch of interest to the edge of your pages. And you could do this, like I said, to carry it kind of continuity through the book. You can do it on a few pages in every signature, and you end up with this really cool page edge. And look at up here where it's ripped. That looks really cool with the ripped edge too. Can you imagine if it was ripped all along and inked, and you did this to a bunch of pages? That'd be awesome. Okay, let's get another page here. So we're going to pull another page out of our faux signature. And let's talk about, while we're doing, treatments on the edges of pages, let's talk a little bit about how I put on fabric ruffles. You can do fabric ruffles several different ways. And you can pre-make your fabric ruffles, like without the paper, just ruffle them up and send them through and then glue them on. Or you can do what mostly I choose to do, which is just sew them right on. Because then you get the benefit of having the stitches on the back side, which I don't mind at all. Some people do. It's really an aesthetic thing. You might not want the stitches on the back, and that would be a good reason to stitch through here and glue it on, because then you won't have any stitches on the back. Sometimes I totally forget that I wanted to put something on here, and I've already got a pocket on the back side, and I can't really, I don't want to stitch over the pocket on the back side of this. So then I'll glue on a ruffle. But I'll show you what I do most of the time when I'm doing ruffles. And we'll go halfway the way that I normally would do it, and then the two different ways that I do it. Actually, let's just do this. We'll cut this in half, and I'll show you the two different ways. So the first way is, I'm going to keep it on a zigzag. You don't have to do it as a zigzag. You can do it as a straight stitch too. I'm just going to keep it on my zigzag for now. The first way that you can do this is to make a very uniform ruffle, like so, where each little flap looks roughly the same. In order to do this, I use a palette knife. This is my little tool, my secret tool for pushing the cloth underneath the presser foot as we're going, so that I can create these ruffles. So see how I can do that? I just push down and push it back under there, and it creates that little ruffle. So I'm going to start with one, right? And that way, if my machine were to hit this, then whatever, it might break a needle. But if my machine were to hit my finger or something, that would be bad. Okay, so sometimes when I'm doing these, I might give it a back stitch or two. And I don't know why that is, but I just do. I don't know. It changes. So now I try to kind of keep a little ruffle going and make it uniform-ish. There's no way to make it totally uniform. But every time I get to kind of the edge of a ruffle, then I put another one under. All right. So there we have a very uniform ruffle, right? Or where like everything is kind of in its place. On the back side, all you're going to see is zigzag stitch. Mind you, I'm not trying to make sure I'm keeping all my threads straight like I normally would do a little more of. And you can do this all the way down the side of a page, or you can do it all the way down, or you can just do it in the top, in the middle, you know, kind of wherever you want to. Now let's take that other chunk, what did I do with? Okay, here. And let's see the other way that I do things, which is probably a little more regular. Oh, and it's also up to you whether it goes right along the edge of the page, or you can go over a little bit so it sticks off the edge, and kind of adds that flair, that fluffiness to the edge of a book. I'm going to do this one that way. So I'm going to start with it a little bit off the page here. And then I'll switch to a straight stitch. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to try and keep going close to the edge of this page, but I'm going to have my fabric obscuring where my edge of my page is. So with a straight stitch, I'm more likely to stay on the fabric. So here I'm going for a sloppy, shabby, chunky, grungy, ruffled up look. Does that make sense? That's an actual term. And sometimes I'll use my palette knife, sometimes I won't, depending on. So now I'm not trying to make the folds go the same way every time. I want some to go over the top, some to come under. I want some to be squishy, so I'm just kind of like mooshing it around. And then I'll use my palette knife to press down on it and send it under that way, all mooshed around. So then this is what I end up with. Yeah. Okay, so now I have this. I should have chosen a different fabric. Well, you can see it well enough, right? So now on the edge, nope, this way. Guys, I'm struggling with like how to hold it because the camera's at such a weird angle. Okay, so this way I've got this kind of, you know, it's hanging off the edge and stuff. Very straight and more uniform. Here, we just kind of smashed it up and went under. And on the edge, now on the back side, you've got that, and then you've got some of this ruffle hanging off the edge, right? You can do that on the edges of your page. You can do it anywhere. You can send a ruffle in the middle of the page. You know, it's so up to you. Another thing that I'll do sometimes in the middle of a page is I will sew a little box, because I think having unique little writing spaces is kind of fun. So in the middle of a page, sometimes I'll do this. I am loosely making a square rectangle-ish shape. That's what I'm going for. You could stop with one square there. I like to go again. I am on purpose trying to not sew over the same lines. So there we go. Now we just have like a frame in the middle of the page, and it just adds some interest to your journal page, right? You could do this and then put a piece of ephemera in the middle. It's kind of up to you. But sometimes if you don't want to do heavy decoration to every page, you can whip through a journal and put some of these kind of things in, or like down in the corner for like a label, or, you know, where they could put the date in or something. Sometimes this sort of stuff, and then you see it on the back side too. So it just adds some interest. It's a way to add interest with sewing. Okay, now let's come over to this side and talk about a few different ways to put tabs on. So I've got some paper tabs and then I've got some fabric tabs. This is just a piece of book page that I have ripped roughly along the edges and folded in half. I'm going to put it over the edge of my page, right? So I'm just going over the edge of my page, and you can kind of determine how far you want it to stick out. And so I'll show you a couple different ways that I sew these on. The first, easiest one is I've got it on a straight stitch. I'm just going to go straight stitch down. Then I'm going to hit my reverse button and reverse back up, not right over the top of it, and then I'm going to let go and come back down again. Then I'm going to hit reverse and go back up and kind of go a different direction again and come back down again. All right, so you can go back and forth on that in as many different directions as you want, right? You can come out here onto the tab, but now you've kind of just got this messy stitching back and forth like that. And you've got it on the back side too. Okay, let's put another tab on. So that was just forward, backward, forward, backward. Then I've got this little graphic. I think this is one of Tracy Fox's butterflies, one of her mini butterfly things. I've just folded it in half because I was like, oh look, butterflies on both sides, right? So say we're making, like, I use this a lot in a field notes type of book or something, but you could do it with almost any image. So if I were doing a field notes book, if I was trying to make it look like, you know, not fancy, but just a little more, then I might want a little more neat and concise sewing on a tab. So I'm going to put it on, and my goal is to sew all the way around here, and in doing so I will have sewn the tab on. So I'm going to just go down this edge first and get to the edge. Okay. Sometimes, and this is why it helps, I can't imagine trying to do this when a book was already sewn into a signature. So we're going to go along the edge here. And then we're going to maneuver our paper around and sew back over to the start. Okay. So now, this time, we've got a tab that's kind of sewn all the way around, and it looks a little bit different. So, I mean, we've got kind of a messy, grungy, shabby one. We've got a little bit more organized one here, right? That on the back, it's going to have that same look. Okay. Then, let's see, we're going to have to cut this guy down the middle, and we'll get ourselves some more page edges. Okay, now I've got a fabric tab. This is just literally a piece of fabric. You guys, I apologize if this is like really old news to you. You don't have to watch, or you can keep watching. I really want to try and encourage everybody at all levels right now. So this time I'm just taking the piece of fabric. I've kind of finger folded it in half. Right, finger pressed it in half. I want the edges to be even because as I put it over the edge of my page, I'll be blind sewing the back side, and I want it, if it's not the same length as this one and I go to the edge of this one, then I'm not going to catch it. So you want it to be even on both sides, right? And a lot of times with these, I'll either do the messy, grungy back and forth, or I'll just put it up to a zigzag stitch and give it a zigzag across. And not even worry about back stitching, right? It's not like clothes. It's not going to get a ton of tugging and moving around and stretching and stuff as people walk and move in it. So there's our little fabric tab. right? Those are cute. My heart journal that I just did, I had a whole bunch of fabric tabs in, and man, it gives it such a fun feel along the edge because, you know, I'm all into like cool feeling stuff. Here's another way to do a tab. Instead of folding it in half and going over this way, I will take a piece of fabric, it's just a little edge piece of muslin, and fold it in half, not meeting, not asymmetric, or not symmetric, excuse me, symmetrical, right? So I'm folding to kind of make a little V shape here. And this one is only going to sit on the front side of the page. So I put that on, I just put the straight edge, and you're going to see these little flappy pieces hanging off the edge. So I'm going to put that down, drop my presser foot, and give it another zigzag along the edge. And there we go. Now we've got two types of, this one is folded over, it's a loop, and this one is just a little flappy V shape, right? And on the back side you'll see it, but you'll only see the stitching, so it doesn't fold over like this one does. Makes sense? Another one that you can do is somewhat similar to the butterfly one. I have two same size pieces of muslin here, and I'm going to put one on the back and one on the front and try to line them up as best I can, because I cut them the same size, so I know that when I'm blind sewing the back side, right, when I'm blind sewing that back one, because it's the same shape as the front one, so if I stay within the parameters of the front one, I should catch the back one. So I'm gonna do this is kind of like the box one, right, like we did for that. Whoops, I am still on zigzag and I want to be on straight stitch. Pretend I didn't just do that. Okay, so we're going to straight stitch inside the edges here. Okay. Turn with me. It feels so funny when you actually sew on just fabric. When you're so used to sewing on paper all the time. Fabric is so movey. It moves and it's fluid. Okay, so can you see? Yeah, kind of, right? Let me block that. Does that help for a second? Kind of. Anyway, I've got a little box sewn. Now, I'm going to sew from that corner, so I went down and around. I'm going to sew from that corner down to this corner. My goal is to make an X in the middle, and you'll see why in a second. It looks really cool. It looks like on a, you know, purse strap or something like that. I'm going to sew across, then I'm going to sew back across this bottom part here to get to the opposite corner. And then I'm going to sew across from that bottom corner to here. And this will all make more sense when I pull this off and show you what I've just done. Okay, so that's what I did. It gives it a little more heft, right? Because you've got this X of fabric on there. But it also just kind of looks cool. And on the back side, it looks the same. So it's a nice way that, you know, the front and the back will look the same. And you can do this. It's really cool if you do this with like little pieces of leather. I've done it with, or like a thicker fabric or something, a canvas. This looks really cool on those because it makes it look like a really official heavy duty tab. Okay, I think we've exhausted the edges of this paper. Let's get this one back. Let's see, what else do I have here? Oh, I pulled out a couple of these are just my stamps. These are my butterfly stamps. And instead of leaving the really raggedy edges, you know, like the scalloped edges like stamps usually have, I just cut those off. This is another cool way to make a tab. Again, they're the same shape roughly. So I know when I do something on the back, it's gonna, you know, as long as it lines up, it'll be the same on the front. And these make a cool tab. So you could just glue them on like that, and that'd be a cool tab. But since this video is about sewing, we'll sew them on because that makes a cool look too. I'm just doing a straight stitch again. So like so many of these things you can do if you don't have a fancy machine. If you have a fancy machine, you can, you know, go up a level on some of this stuff by, you know, instead of just using a straight stitch right here, you could use a scallop stitch to kind of mimic the stamp thing. But I want to show you the just kind of most basic level, and then you can kind of take your, I mean, your imagination is your limit, right? These are just all the things when I say, I'm going to go over to my machine and sew really quick. These are all the things that I'm doing over there. So that looks really cool, right? Now you've got an image on front and on back. And that's another cool way to put a tab on. Put things on the edges of your paper, add interest off the edge of the paper. You still save most of your page for journaling, but now you've got some interest, you've got some decoration on that page, right? And then I was going to show you sometimes when I do a fabric ruffle, I forgot, I just had a bunch of pieces over here and I'm trying to remember what I was thinking with all the pieces. Where are we at? 36 minutes. Okay, we're doing good. Sometimes I like to layer things on. So I've got a piece of this sari silk here, and then I've got a piece of lace. Maybe I want the sari silk to be, you know, crunched up underneath it, and the silk, or I mean, and the lace to go flat across the top of that for some interest. So first I'm going to put my presser foot down on top of the lace and the sari silk all together, right? But if I want the lace to stay straight and this to get crunchy underneath, I'll hold it up and I'll smash it in there a little bit first. And you can do this with any fabric. And then I'm going to give it a stitch. And so now I'm trying to stay along the same edge of my lace, and meanwhile just smooshing the, you know, so what I do is kind of get, this one is a little bit more fussy. You have to stop and go on it a lot, but it's a cool effect when you're done with it. So then once I get some more situated, I sew some more. Then I stop when I get to the edge of where I was situated and smoosh some more up. Then I'm kind of holding this part down, and that's holding those in. And I use my little super secret tool, palette knife. You can get these super cheap at probably even Walmart, but for sure, you know, Michael's and any, you know, if you're in the UK, I'm sure Hobbycraft and stuff. They're in the painting section usually. Okay, I'm going to trim off that chunk of lace. So here, whoops, sorry, just banged my camera. So here's how this looks. So we've got ruffly underneath and a flat piece going on top. A whole different look, right? And that's a different way to provide lace. You know, you don't have to do it with lace and sari silk. You could do this with fabric. You could do it with muslin or cheesecloth, and then put lace over the top or a ribbon over the top, right? Okay, I think we've exhausted that page. Next, I've got some more fun stuff over here. I hope you guys are finding some of this interesting or helpful. I have not, you know, this isn't anything mind-blowing, but I hope these are all tricks that I have either figured out on my own or learned along the way from other people. Okay, another thing that I have done in the past is zigzagged over stuff, hunks of things. So this is some really thick, like, I think you guys would call it maybe hessian. It's jute, it's twine, it's, you know, whatever. It's a really thick piece. This looks really cool if you're doing like a farm journal, country journal. If you're doing like a field notes journal, you could do this and put some leaves, paper leaves behind it or something. I'm just going to show you how to just go over this, because even though it looks like, oh, well, that's just a piece of jute, when you zigzag over the top of it, it's like a whole, it's next level. It looks super cool. And what I'll often do is kind of fray the edges. So most of them are like a 3 or 4 cords, you know. So I'll kind of fray the end here a little bit, right? Make it look a little unraveled, because that kind of looks cool up at the top and the bottom. So sometimes I'll do the bottom too. Well, most of the time I will. Now I'm going to go, we don't want to sew over the frayed part, so we want to start right about where it stopped, where it started being wound for real. And I'm going to go to a zigzag. Now, you really would only be able to do this one if you have a zigzag that you can adjust the width of, because you're going to want to put your zigzag as wide as it can go, because what we want to do is go over the cord. We don't want to sew through it. So we don't actually want to go through the cord at all. We just want to go on either side of it, and we're basically like encaging it or encapsulating it, right? So this one, I am going to go back and forth on, oh, excuse me, my pedal is sliding around on the plastic under my, okay, so I'm gonna go back and forth a little bit. And now what I'm trying to do is keep my cord, you know, so that I have even space over here on the edge, like you would seam allowance or something. Trying to hold it flat here and hold it a little bit taut, and run my paper through at the same time, and keep my cord in the middle of that little marker, you know, in the middle of my foot, my presser foot. My goal is to just keep getting my stitching to go over top of it, not through it. I'm going to keep going here. I'm going to realign. Sometimes I have to stop, realign it, press down hard so it stays in that same spot, and guide the paper with my other hand. And I'm going to fray the end a little bit here. And I'm going to sew right up to where it's frayed, and then I'm going to back stitch a few times and cut it off. Now, that is kind of cool looking, isn't it? I wish you could feel it, because it feels so cool on the edge of the page. I've done this with twigs. Like if you can find skinny enough little twigs, you can do that. I wish I could like get a better full, if I hold it kind of like this, you can get a full shot, right? Anyway, doesn't that look cool? That would look cool on the edges of like nature books or farm books or things. And now I've done it in black, so obviously it's very bold and it darkened this up. But if you do it with a green, it would be very cool in like a nature book. If you did it with a lighter color or a color that was similar to the jute, then it would just look like it was kind of hanging out there. Also, you can, so I made my stitch as long as it goes this way. You can lengthen your stitch too, so you would see less of the, well, actually, I've got another one that I'm going to show you. I have got this piece of, this is recycled sari thread. It's super cool. It sucks to do much with because it's so stringy, but it looks cool on the edge of a page like this. I'm going to leave, when you cut it, it gets all frayed and stuff like this. So, but I'm going to leave some of that up top because I like to have stuff sticking out of my books. Sometimes, I don't know, different styles. So I'm going to do the same thing, but now I'm going to keep it really wide because I need it to get all the way over, but I'm also going to make it a longer stitch this way, so as long as it can go. So now I've got my machine set as wide as it can go and as long as the stitch can be. So we'll try this one. It's going to move way faster because the stitch is longer, so it's going to move way faster. So you might have to slow your speed down, slow your roll if you're not used to this. Hear it squeaking in and out of the paper, depending on what kind of paper you're sewing. Okay, now I'm going to, obviously we don't need all that excess. And all right, so there we go with that one. Now you can see what it looks like when they're really close together. Oops, this way. And then here's one where they are further apart. You can see the fiber more, right? So cool along the edge. See how both of them look together? Kind of cool just having two of them along the edge together like that. I mean, you can do this however you want to. I wouldn't suggest putting too much of this on the inside fold because that's going to bulk up the inside of your signature, and then it's going to, you know, if we want alligator mouth, we want it because we've had too much stuff out here. If not too much on the inside fold, if you've got too much going on in here, then your book is going to get chunked up way faster. So if you're going to put stuff, we usually try to put, you know, if you're going to put a bunch of this kind of stuff, try to keep it to the outside edges, or your journal will get too hard to even close. Okay, so there's that. I mean, honestly, sewing lace along the edge of a page is pretty easy, right? You just hang it over as much as you want to and sew down the edge. I won't insult your intelligence. However, I will show you this because somebody actually asked specifically about this, so I'm going to show you this. I brought a piece, oh, banged the camera again. I brought a piece of this tassel edging. So the way that I do this, and I mean, it's the same way that I would do anything else, but I will show you so you can see that I'm not lying. I line it up, and depending on how far you want the tassels to hang over, which this one, I'm going to go, you know, this strip that is holding them together, I'm going to just line that up to the edge of the page. And you can do this one with a zigzag or a straight stitch. I think I would prefer a zigzag because I feel like it holds more of that on there. Then I'm going to, whoops. Oh, I've got it, that's right. I've got it on super huge right now. I'm going to make it long. So the only trick with doing this is, and I think this is what somebody had asked, is when you get to the knot on the tassels here, this little knot part here, your presser foot, depending on how long your tassels, you know, trim is, it's going to have to go up and over that. So how I get around that is just by, I mean, you don't, there's no way to get around it. You just, and you don't, if your presser foot doesn't go over it, it's going to want to send the knot to the side of it, and that's going to pull the stuff, the trim off the page, and we don't want that. So here's what I say. I've done a bunch of this. I still go slow. I lock my stitch in place at the top, and then I just go slow. And sometimes I have to kind of help it. I hold real close up here, so that way if it does go off a little bit, it only goes off the place where the knot is. I have to kind of push the knot along with this finger sometimes. Sometimes I even have to lift my presser foot up and down a little bit to get over that knot. Okay, so, so like right there, that one doesn't want to go. So I'm going to lift it up, push the little knot to the back, make sure this is back on course, and keep going. Now here comes my next one. I'm going to kind of lift it up and get it under there if I can. So it might seem like a lot of work, but it's worth it because, like, if you really want the tassel trims on there, if you're having a book that's got all kinds of fun edges, these tassel trims are big payoff. They look so cool on the edge of a book. But like you can see here, it is a little bit of work. So you definitely, if you're doing this and you think, oh, I'm going to put this tassel trim on 5 pages in every signature because that'll be so cool to have so much of it. Yep. I'm just telling you, prepare for the amount of time it takes to get this stuff on there to look nice and neat. Now, again, you don't have to have it look nice and neat. I have whacked off chunks of different kinds of upholstery trims and sewn them on in weird ways, and that's fine too. It's all up to your style and what you're going for. Okay. there we go. Tassel trim, the same thing with pom-pom trim, right? So now it looks kind of cool, and the back side, you can still see the tassels. You have a little zigzag there. And, you know, when you close your book, it does look really cool when you close your book and you have these little pom-poms hanging off the edge. So there's the tassel trim. Then, okay, I'm going to cut this sheet to make us this one. So this is just some like knitting yarn. It's just some cool fiber that I have. It's a really loopy, what is the word for this? Oh my gosh, I was just going to say the word of it for it, but now I can't think of it. Anyway, it's that real loopy, oh my gosh, there's a word for it and it's driving me crazy. So, say you want to add something like this to the edge of a page. You know, you're doing maybe a fairy journal or, you know, an ocean journal or something where you want some wispy stuff to the edge, even a nature journal or something. And you kind of want this just going around and around. So here's what I would say. This is one of the ways that I've done this in the past. I just kind of looped it around here. So I've got it looped, and then I'm going to loop it back up over like this just to get me started. And I'm going to put my presser foot down right at the top. Now my goal is not to catch every part of this, it's just to catch it as I go back and forth. So I'm going to stay with the zigzag stitch. Well, actually I'll show you with the straight stitch because you can go back and forth a few times. So we're just going to go down and catch the first part of this here. Then as I go, I'm going to loop some more around and get it kind of situated like that, and then I'm going to sew over it again till I get over most of those loops and they're stuck in there, and then I'm going to do some more laying it, and you can have it go off the edge of the page if you want to. You can have it go real straight back and forth zigzaggy, you can have it be real wavy, you can have it be super messy, you know, kind of as much or little as you want. You can add other things in here, other kinds of fiber. You know, you could be looping some eyelash trim in here with this at the same time, depending on how intense you want this look to be. I'm again just kind of looping it around, piling it on top of itself. And then once I get to the edge of that, I just loop some more around, pile it on top of itself, like that. Okay, and then I'm just trying to stay in a straight line down the page. And then we get to the end here, I'm gonna, oh look at that, that was a good choice of how long to make this. I'm gonna go over, whoops, am I caught on something? What am I caught on? Oh, I caught on the edge of one of the pieces of fiber, went over my presser foot, so be careful. I hope I didn't tear my paper. I certainly have done that. Okay, so I'm going to get to the bottom, and that's what we have so far, right? So you could leave it that way as long as all the ruffles are caught. Or to secure it a little more, we can do that wavy back and forth thing a little. I'm just going to make sure I don't catch on any of those, more of those fibers. And I'm going to turn it and go one more time down. And then as I go down this last time, I'll show you. Sometimes I go, and you see this a lot in my work and other people's work, I'll go straight for a little bit, then I'll switch to a zigzag. And go for a little bit, then I'll go back to a straight stitch. And then maybe we'll finish with a little bit more zigzag. And that provides interest on the front here, right? But it also provides interest on the back side where all you see is the wavy stitching. Then you've got a little bit of zigzag and a little bit of everything. So there's that side. So that's a way you can do it. It feels cool. And if you have it hanging off the edges of pages, it looks kind of cool. It's a very messy look depending on how, like now you could, like I said, you could make it very uniform, back and forth, back and forth. But sometimes if you're doing like a woodland journal or a fairy journal or something, this kind of look is kind of cool. You know what else it reminds me of? I did a bird journal a couple months ago, and I made a spine that was full of like just a whole bunch of different fibers and cuts of yarn and twine and stuff, kind of like a bird's nest would be. And that's what this kind of reminds me of too. So it'd be kind of cool if you had something that looked a little bit like more brown the whole way down or something. It would be kind of a cute thing to do on the edge of like a bird book, you know, to kind of echo that bird thing. And then in my head, what was I just thinking? Oh, I had one more thing, you guys, that I was going to show you. Oh, you know, I suppose, let's see, what time are we at? Oh, God, we're at 56 minutes. Okay. It was something about sewing on the edges of things. Oh, yeah, one more thing. Okay, so like with a zigzag stitch, if you can adjust the width and the length of your zigzag stitch, I'd say another cool way to add some interest just down the edge of a page, start with it at a regular width, then adjust the width to as big as it can go and as long as it can go for a second. Then maybe bring it back down to normal. Then maybe bring it to really long and really skinny. And then let's put it way wide again and really long. And then let's go back to normal. There we go. So with one single stitch and just some adjustments, we've made kind of a cool texture down the page. Now you could take that and you could do a straight stitch zigzaggy back and forth across it. Another stitch that I have that I like to do this adjusting with is, let's see, hold on, where is it? Oh, 50. I was going to say, I know it's in the 50s. Okay, so some of these fancy stitches, again, let me show you. This one, it's like the baseball stitching stitch, and it's gonna do not good. Now I'm gonna have all this extra thread, but whatever. It's gonna do not good on single paper alone, unless I widen it up and lengthen it. So I'll go at that for a minute, then I'll make it really wide and really long. Then I'll go not as wide and stay long. Then I'll go narrower and shorten it up a bit. Right, so I just keep varying the stitch length and the stitch width. And just by doing that, you get some unique results, right? So that it varies from smaller to bigger to wider. And so just by varying your stitch like that, you can get a kind of a cool look for the edge of a page or something. So, yeah. Okay, I hope that in all of this that I just talked you through, all of these things, I hope that you found something helpful in all of this. If you're a beginner and you have questions, if I went too fast, if I didn't show something you really wanted to know that you think of that I've done before, or even if you've seen someone else do it and I can maybe try to replicate it, just let me know. I really want to encourage you guys in order to do these things. Plus, I just want you to see, like when I say, I'm gonna go sew and I'll be right back. this is what I'm doing. So now you'll be able to reference this video and see what I'm doing over there and how I do it, okay? And I hope this has given you some ideas and some encouragement to try some of these cool things on the edges of your pages and stuff. Because, you know, sometimes, I like to say, sometimes it's the small little things like this that make a huge impact. It's not always the big, bold pieces and stuff that we put in. Sometimes it's the small stuff like this that carries the continuity through a book. You know, when you do the same edge stitching on a bunch of pages, it carries that continuity then through the book, and it provides a little bit more cohesive look. So anyway, I hope you found this interesting and helpful. I will be back tomorrow with another sewing video. We'll go through cards and journaling cards and tags and things like that. And yeah. And so I hope this is what you guys were looking for when I've heard all the requests. Until I see you guys next time, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, middle of the night, whatever time it is, on whatever side of this global virus that you live on. And until I see you then, take care, stay safe, try sewing some stuff if you have a sewing machine. And God bless you guys. All right, take care. Bye.